Let's go Broncos! There's one question that keeps getting bigger every single day at Broncos OTAs, and the answer could end up determining the success or failure of Denver's entire offense this season. What exactly does Sean Payton see in Davis Webb that convinced him to do something he has never done before? Think about that. We're talking about one of the most respected offensive minds in football. A coach who has spent years controlling every detail of his offense. A coach who doesn't hand over responsibility lightly. Yet somehow, Davis Webb earned enough trust to take on one of the most important jobs inside the organization. And the more we hear from players and coaches, the more fascinating this story becomes. Because while fans are understandably focused on star players, touchdowns, and position battles, there are growing signs that the biggest difference maker for the Broncos this season might not be wearing a helmet at all. At the same time, another development from OTAs is starting to generate serious excitement. A player that many fans felt was underutilized last season suddenly appears to be receiving much more attention inside this offense. And if the early signs are accurate, we could be looking at one of the biggest offensive storylines of the entire year. But here's what makes this so interesting. These two stories may actually be connected. Because if Davis Webb truly brings a new perspective to the offense, certain players could benefit in a massive way. And one player in particular seems to be emerging as an early favorite to become a much bigger part of the game plan. Before we break everything down, make sure you've already hit the like button if you believe the Denver Broncos offense is going to surprise a lot of people this season. And I want every optimistic Broncos fan watching right now to leave this comment below. Go Broncos! Our offense is ready to explode. Personally, I think this is one of the most important storylines of the entire offseason. Not because we know Davis Webb will succeed, but because we don't know. That's what makes it so fascinating. New ideas, new responsibilities, and a fresh voice inside the offense can sometimes unlock things nobody saw coming. And if Sean Payton trusts Davis Webb enough to hand him this opportunity, that's something I think every Broncos fan should be paying close attention to. Now let's talk about what Broncos players are saying about Davis Webb behind the scenes and why those comments may reveal much more than people realize. Personally, I think this may be one of the most underrated storylines of the entire offseason. Everyone naturally focuses on players, but coaching decisions often determine whether talent reaches its full potential. And if Davis Webb truly becomes the difference maker many people inside the organization believe he can be, this could end up being one of the most important moves the Broncos have made in a very long time. What makes this situation so intriguing is that we're not just talking about a new offensive coordinator. According to the information discussed, we're talking about someone who appears to have taken on a much larger role throughout the entire offensive operation. During OTAs, Davis Webb was noticeably more involved with multiple position groups, spending time not only with quarterbacks but also with wide receivers and other offensive players, helping explain concepts, alignments, route responsibilities, and overall execution. And honestly, that detail shouldn't be overlooked. Because one of the biggest challenges for any offensive coordinator isn't drawing plays on a whiteboard. It's teaching players how those plays work together. It's making sure every player understands not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it. That's where the comments about Webb becoming a mad scientist start becoming even more interesting. Multiple players have publicly praised his football knowledge, his communication skills, and his ability to command the room. And the more you hear those comments from different people throughout the organization, the harder it becomes to dismiss them as simple offseason optimism. What's fascinating is that Sean Payton appears to be trusting Webb with responsibilities that go beyond traditional coaching duties. The discussion emphasized something important. While this remains Sean Payton's offense, Webb now has the opportunity to put his own fingerprints on it. That doesn't mean changing everything. It means adding new perspectives, new ideas, and potentially new ways of helping players succeed within the existing structure. And that might be exactly what this offense needs. Because one of the recurring themes from last season was inconsistency. There were stretches where the offense looked explosive. There were stretches where it struggled. There were drives that seemed effortless. And there were drives that stalled almost immediately. The hope now appears to be that Webb can help create a smoother operation from start to finish. One of the concepts discussed involves simplifying communication and shortening play calls, allowing players to process information more quickly and play faster. If that works, it could help eliminate some of the operational issues that occasionally surfaced in previous seasons. But perhaps the most exciting development from OTAs involves Evan Engram. Because if there is one player who seems positioned to benefit from Webb's influence, it might be him. According to the observations discussed from practice, Engram was heavily involved during the OTA session that was observed. In fact, he reportedly finished with the most targets and the most receptions among the skill position players that day. More importantly, it wasn't just the volume of touches that stood out, it was how he was being used. That is a critical distinction. The discussion highlighted several examples of Ingram being featured in ways that many observers had wanted to see much more often. Working across the middle of the field, finding space against zone coverage, running routes that allow him to gain momentum before catching the football, being moved around the formation, creating favorable matchups. In other words, utilizing the exact traits that make him dangerous. And honestly, this might be the most encouraging part of the entire OTA report, because the frustration surrounding Ingram was never about talent. It was about opportunities. Many people believed there were more ways to get him involved, more ways to create easier completions, and more ways to allow him to generate yards after the catch. Based on what was observed during OTAs, it appears those ideas may finally be receiving greater attention. One phrase from the discussion really stood out, the idea of Evan Ingram becoming the offense's easy button. Think about that. Every successful offense has players that make life easier. Players that can turn a simple throw into a positive gain. Players that help create manageable second downs. Players that keep drives alive. And there seems to be growing belief that Ingram can fill exactly that role. My opinion on this is simple. If the Broncos truly want to become a more efficient offense, finding consistent ways to involve Evan Ingram makes a tremendous amount of sense. The early OTA observations don't guarantee anything, but they do suggest that the coaching staff is at least exploring ways to make him a larger part of the offensive structure. And if Davis Webb is indeed helping shape those decisions, Broncos fans have every reason to be curious about what this offense could eventually become. And that's where this story becomes so important for the Broncos moving forward. Because right now, everything we're hearing points toward one central idea: the Broncos have assembled an offense with far more options than they had before. The challenge is no longer whether talent exists. The challenge is whether the coaching staff can maximize all of those pieces at the same time. According to the discussion surrounding OTAs, Davis Webb now finds himself in a fascinating position. He inherits an offense that features multiple playmakers, several different skill sets, and a head coach who clearly trusts him enough to hand over responsibilities that many people never expected Sean Payton to surrender. That alone tells you how much confidence exists inside the building. But confidence and results are not the same thing. That's what makes this upcoming season so intriguing. Nobody truly knows what Davis Webb will look like as a full-time play caller during meaningful games. Nobody knows exactly how his tendencies will differ. Nobody knows how aggressive he'll be. Nobody knows how he'll respond when things aren't working. And perhaps most importantly, nobody knows how he'll handle the pressure that comes with being responsible for an offense carrying significant expectations. That's why I keep coming back to the trust factor. Sean Payton has worked with a lot of coaches throughout his career. He's worked with experienced coordinators. He's worked with talented assistants. He's worked with respected football minds. Yet according to the discussion, this is the first time he has handed over play calling responsibilities in this manner. That fact alone should grab the attention of every Broncos fan. Because Sean Payton is not making this move out of convenience. He's making it because he believes Webb can handle it. And if Payton believes that, then Broncos country should at least be paying